realistically speaking, sometimes it's so chaotic and so busy, you just have to push through and get through. But to find the inspirational moments, I think it's important to have time to reflect.
Dr. Peter M. Crane, MD, FAAFP, is a board-certified family physician practicing in beautiful rural Idaho since 2011 when he was hired to replace the same physician who delivered him.
Dr. Crane has made several medical service trips providing healthcare to people in Ecuador, Kenya, Mexico, and Uganda.
I find that I don't focus on the negative and the chaos. I usually focus on the inspirational or the stuff that help. And so I try to find purpose in that, even through the chaotic, challenging moments that we all get. And my wife, she said, I have made a goal to not say anything negative to myself or to anybody else. Doesn't mean she had to be like positive. She just decided to say, focus on those things that were non-negatives. So I've tried to do the same thing. If I make myself review those multiple interactions that were positive, then I can say, okay, even though this was chaotic, I can still do this. I can go back tomorrow and it's going to be all right.
Welcome to the Interesting MD podcast, the show about what doctors do when we aren't seeing patients and how this can help us find balance and prevent burnout. I'm your host, Rob Beck.
All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Interesting MD podcast. I'm your host, Rob Beck. I have a wonderful guest today with me, Dr. Peter Crane. But before I get to Dr. Crane, I just wanted to thank everybody who has been emailing me and who has been sending me messages on social media. It's actually starting to have a little bit of traction now, and I'm trying to get back to everybody. So thank you very much. Please keep your questions coming. Easiest way to get is rob@interestingmd.com. Again, rob@interestingmd.com, and I'll try and get back to you. Now on to the fun stuff. I have with me today Dr. Peter Crane. He is the host of the Doctors Making a Difference podcast. And if you're a physician and you're having a little bit of inspiration fatigue, you need to listen to Dr. Peter Crane. He has some amazing stories that are truly inspiring, and I am very lucky to have Dr. Crane on with me today. So Peter, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I appreciate it. Honestly, it's a great privilege for me to be here. I've enjoyed listening to some of your podcast episodes and also derive some inspiration. And yeah, my whole goal on the podcast that I do is I'm a regular practicing doctor, like most of our listeners, but I find the stories really inspiring. And I also want to make sure people have the tools to stay in practice and be successful, because I feel like there's so many factors that are against doctors, or there's this assumption that you're only in a position of privilege and that everybody is wealthy and set up really well. But I find that most doctors really are a little bit clueless about money and find themselves a little bit stressed when they actually get into the practice of medicine. So we've got to find a way to make it workable so we keep our doctors in medicine and not have everybody just like leave medicine. It seems like a lot of people have done that.
Yeah, going to 4 years of medical school, 4 years of undergrad, getting all of that student loan debt, and then burning out in practice early in your career. That's not really helpful. We need to keep people going. So thanks for what you're doing. Can you just tell me a little bit about yourself? Where are you from? Where'd you go to school? What's your practice like now?
Yeah, you bet. I grew up in rural Idaho. A farm kid, grew up picking rocks and driving tractors and moving sprinkler pipes and all the things that you do if you're a Idaho farm kid. And I remember my dad, one time when I was in high school, we was kind of talking about what I should do when I grew up. And he knew I liked science and I liked helping people. And we had a doctor in our community, is a family doctor, and he said, you should be like this doctor. You know, you could do a little bit of farming and you could come back and take care of the community. And I don't know why, it kind of stuck with me. And so did my undergrad years and came back and eventually decided to enroll in medical school. And I went to the University of Utah. And then because I wanted to come back to a rural area, I chose family medicine because I could do a little bit of everything, take care of the babies, get to do some of the C-sections and a lot of procedures and take care of people from when they're born to when they die. It's a full spectrum sort of practice for sure.
From the uterus to the grave.
Yeah, all the way.
Now, how did your father think that it was like, oh yeah, you can do some farming and be a doctor on the side? Like, how did he...
I don't know.
Was that doctor doing that? Or those are two really big full-time jobs.
Right. So I don't know that it was based on anything. Like my dad's not a doctor. He didn't really have any understanding of what that was like. But there was this doctor in the community at that time that owned a bunch of farm ground. And now that I know more about it, I think he paid people to do a lot of the farming stuff. And he would come in and enjoy parts of it that he liked. And he liked being out in the fields and operating the ranch and, being up in the hills because it's beautiful. And it was something that he really enjoyed. when I was a kid, I wanted to be just like my dad. Like, hey, I want to be a farmer. But, being a farmer in rural Idaho in the high country, we live at 6,000 feet elevation. It's
Oh,
hard to
wow.
be very successful as a farmer. And so I think my dad saw that there was a way to maybe keep a little bit more of a financially viable job and still do it. And but really, I don't know why that kind of stuck with me, but it kind of planted that seed in my mind. Like, maybe you could be a doctor, and I'd never even thought about it before. Like, oh, well, maybe I could. And then I took some. We have this interesting little class that the high school put on then and still puts on now called medical careers. And I got to watch somebody get their appendix taken out, or somebody have a scope, or there was a bunch of different things I got exposed to even at that early age in high school. And it just sort of resonated with me. Like, it was science, it was helping people, it was interesting, fascinating. And so even in my undergrad years and thereafter, I just kind of stuck with that idea that was what I wanted to do, and I ended up doing it. I guess I'm very boring. That's what I decided I wanted to do, and it just resonated and stuck with me, even when it kind of came to those adult decisions.
Yeah, that's not boring at all. I mean, I think that it's a set of values, right? And it's a goal, and you work towards it and you got there. I mean, how lucky are you? That's great.
Yeah.
So you are a family medicine doctor. Sounds like you're kind of doing all of the things, though. Is that right? How far away
Well,
are you from kind of the bigger hospitals? Or, I mean, are
so
you doing
it's about
C-sections, appendectomies, stuff like that? Or
I don't do appendectomies. We're lucky enough to have a surgeon that we share with a hospital about 45 minutes away. It's two surgeons, and they kind of take turns between both hospitals doing appendectomies. Me and my practice partners deliver babies and do C-sections for sure. I don't think you could do obstetrics in a rural area unless you have people that can do C-sections, because there's a percentage of
right.
people that have to have that. And so I was fortunate to go to a residency in Indiana, an unopposed residency, as they say in family medicine. There was no other people really learning there that could take away from some of those procedures. So we were able to learn a lot of procedural things and become pretty comfortable with that. But yeah, for sure, it's a full spectrum practice, I guess, from all the way from the cradle to the grave. And I do enjoy it. Like, the cool thing is you get to do everything. The bad thing is you have to do everything because there's nobody else.
Right.
You asked how far away the nearest center is. It's about an hour and a half drive each direction if you're driving through the canyons, assuming they're open. Sometimes in the winter months, things get a little bit dicey. And so it may or may not be accessible when you need it.
Wow. There are definitely places like that here in British Columbia where I am that it has been very interesting. One time when I was driving to Nanaimo, a couple hours away from here, I drove across the mountain, and one morning this huge atmospheric river came through and just washed out the highway. That was the one highway up and down the island. And so I was stuck. The winds were so bad that they couldn't get the helicopters to fly up and down, and it's a mess. And in the winter, there's definitely a lot. It's a logistical nightmare sometimes, right? And you kind of just get stuck, and you're like, well, all right. Wildfires sometimes close the roads to the other side of the island, and you're just like, well. They were ferrying doctors in on one of the hospitals in Tofino, which is kind of like a little surf town on the west coast of the island, that wildfires closed down the road for days, and they were ferrying doctors in on seaplanes and helicopters, and patients just going back and forth, all the emergent patients going back and forth. So it's an interesting way to practice.
Oh yeah. Well, and I think about, no matter where we live, our bodies just break. Even if people are careful, the human body just has lots of things that can go wrong and break. And what I found working in rural medicine is, of course, I could send people to any specialist they want. Let's say I'll refer you. If they're willing to go, I'll send them. And we work really well with our specialist colleagues, in those places when it's appropriate. But a lot of people can't travel. They've got socioeconomic factors that make it so they don't have reliable transportation or ability to travel easily. And then there's weather factors that make it so it's hard. And then the other piece that I never really thought about was, if you are from a small rural area and you ask somebody to go drive in a big city with lots of freeways and traffic, a lot of the folks haven't driven there, are very uncomfortable with driving in those situations. And so they have to rely on family members to take them. So anyway, all those factors make it so that when somebody presents with something kind of acute, we also cover the emergency room. So they'll come to the emergency room with something that needs to be addressed, and we'll certainly take care of it or transfer them or bring in the specialist, whatever we can do. But it happens reasonably often where somebody has something in an ideal, perfect situation. You'd have them to a referral center in a real defined timeline. But other times you have to say, well, this is a person we have to manage locally. We can do it over the phone. We have telecritical care doctors that support us, and we can call specialists in the larger centers. But many times the person is there with us for several hours until they can safely
Yeah.
transfer out. It's I thought about it before I came, but coming here, I've been here almost 15 years in my little area. It's interesting to kind of deal with the logistics of that because it becomes your lived reality. It can happen any day without you really necessarily preparing for it that specific day.
Yeah. Can ruin a lot of plans, I'm sure.
For sure.
All right. Well, so let's talk a little bit about the podcast. So again, it's the Doctors Making a Difference podcast, correct?
Right.
So
That's
just
correct.
making sure. So how did you get into that? What kind of inspired you? What helped you to pull the trigger on doing this? Like made you want to do it?
Right. So maybe it's too much information, TMI, but for several years I've observed some of my coworkers and people in referral centers leaving medicine. And I've noticed that just like we all have, a lot of people say, well, I'm going to leave medicine. I'm going to become a real estate investor. I'm going to retire when I'm in my early 40s or whatever it is, because they get so burned out, so frustrated. And I kept thinking like, well, it's hard if you don't have any of the doctors there, who's going to take care of the patients? And so it's important for us to maintain our sanity and maintain our life so that we can continue to work longer and better. And then the kind of the personal part of it, I've shared on my podcast pretty extensively, is about 2 years ago, I found this horrible tumor in my abdomen. Like I just woke up one day and had my hand on my stomach and realized there was a mass. I didn't know what it was, but anyway, fast forward, it was discovered to be a large, rare type of tumor called a solitary fibrous tumor, and it was a big major blow to realize, I was 43 years old and suddenly have this major league health issue with a very large retroperitoneal tumor. With that process, I got the opportunity or the curse or whatever you want to say about it, to go through radiation and major surgery and stuff that I never envisioned. And the doctor that did my surgery had been my surgery preceptor when I was in medical school years before. So it was kind of a full circle moment. But as I was laying there recovering, and I wasn't sure what came next. Was it actually going to, make it so I could go back to practice? Was this going to make it so that I was going to be forever paralyzed? Because I did have some partial paralysis after the surgery. Was it going to metastasize and, shorten my life drastically? I just didn't know. But as I was laying there recovering at the cancer center for those days, I just had this really clear thought. This kind of this epiphany, and I just thought, if I got to do anything, I'd be a doctor. That's what I would do. And I know I'm a doctor, but it was just like this moment, like I would want to be among this group of healers, not just because it's a nice job or whatever, but like you make a huge difference on somebody's life, and everything in those moments in the hospital hinged on what they did, on their expertise, on their cumulative years of experience, and everything about me and my family and my world hinged on the expertise of those doctors. And I thought to myself, I've got to do this. I need to be able to elevate the voices of these people who are actually making a difference, and not just talk about burnout and how terrible it is, but talk about ways to keep practicing it and make a difference. Like for the reason we all decided to go to medical school for that same set of reasons, and, re-engage with that and find a way to make sure that we have a way to stay in medicine and find ourselves staying engaged.
Wow. Thank you for that story. And thanks for sharing that with me and with
You're
everybody. I think that also while you're sitting there and, you think, okay, well, I'd rather have the surgeon that has 20 years of experience or 15 years of experience as opposed to the surgeon who has 1 year of experience. And for those of you who are surgeons with 1 year of experience, I was also a doctor with 1 year of experience at one point. And we need you for sure, but there is this experience. There is this need for the collective brain trust out there that we need to keep doctors going. And for the doctor who is there for 1 year, we need you here for another 20, 30 years and keeping you going and finding that inspiration. And I think this is amazing. I think that's really great. I'm glad that you're doing this.
Oh, thank you. There's some pretty good data that show that a lot of doctors sort of peak in their 50s. Like probably that, the age 50 to 60 decade somewhere is when you sort of reach maximum skill set, maximum knowledge set, and you're just really good at what you do. And some people, can age clear into their 70s and be excellent at it, but just not the average human experience. People can just be really in their prime, kind of in their 40s and their 50s. So if we have a lot of our physicians exit medicine while they're in their 40s, what a thing we're missing out on. And for sure, when I was going through
Yeah.
that surgery, the first thought that came to my mind is, this is a big deal. It's probably wrapped around a bunch of nerves with this tumor. And the person I wanted to do it was the doctor I knew and trusted and had referred patients back and forth to for several years. And I knew her from way back. And had she retired and said, "Oh, I'm in my 50s, so I'm out of here, no longer doing medicine," that would have been a tremendous loss. So I'm so thankful that she was there. And anybody that sticks with it for that prolonged period of time and continues to make a tremendous difference, it means everything to the patients.
And so that is what makes you focus on all of this. And that's amazing.
It is. And I want to give people tools to not just like rah, 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 but like, okay, not only let's be motivated, but let's find tools to actually do this. How do you reform it so that you can stay in medicine? You're certainly going to make a lot more money if you stay in medicine longer than try to burn yourself out in 7 years and hit financial independence when you're 43 and retire. It's a lot better game and a lot more satisfying if you can find a way to stay in. But you do have to grapple with the chaos of the modern medical system.
Yeah. So with all these stories that you hear, what are some of them that have really stuck with you? I know that there's can never be one favorite, just like your children, right? You don't have a favorite child. You just love them for all the different reasons. But what are some of the stories that you have had over the last year or so that have really stuck with you and that have really meant something to you and that have really kind of reignited or made you think about the things that really resonate?
Like, there's so many. You're right. It's hard to pick. I've found that I resonate so much with some of the stories when you hear why people have done it. I'll refer you back to one of my episodes with Dr. Eric Arzubi. Awesome guy. Had all the opportunities in the world, in the business world. And at an age where most physicians were already attending physicians, he started medical school then. He said he was on a business career track. He was writing for a big national magazine. He had all the things in place that you would have expected to be successful from a financial life. He just said, I reflected on myself and said, this isn't going to make the difference I need to make in the world with the skills that I have. So he went back to studying for the MCAT, when he's in his 30s, and just really kind of humbled himself. And I don't think he said he never has still now, even years later, ever made as much money, with inflation adjusted, as much as he made in those years as a financial guy. But his life is infinitely more meaningful because of what he did. And so I encourage you to go back to listen to that episode.
Yeah.
Really inspiring guy. But story after story after story like that of people who said, I only get to do this once. I get a few decades of productivity in my life. And being a doctor is the thing that makes me have the most productivity and make the most difference and leave the world better than I found it. And that's one story that I'll never forget. So just kudos to Eric and all Arzubi and all the work that he's doing now.
Okay, so I haven't heard that one yet. I'm definitely going to go back and find that one because obviously I'm all very interested in the business side of medicine and people doing startups and things like that. But I think that it really is true that with the startups that I've been a part of, that they've been really great, a lot of fun. One of them was successful, but it's doesn't mean nearly as much as when you walk in and a patient grabs your hand and just trusts you fully and puts their life or puts the life of their spouse or their child or their parent, whatever, in your hands. That's the kind of stuff that goes on the personal statement that you really were looking for and that you were really connecting with a patient. Yeah. I don't think that anybody ever gets that when you walk into a boardroom and they're like, thanks, you made us a lot of money. And, yeah, that's great. And, if there's any boards looking out there for that opportunity, sure, I'm available for that kind of stuff on the side too. But
you bet. We all want to make money.
Yeah.
It makes so much of a difference. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, that's sometimes that's not what does it for me. It's the excitement and it's the connection with people, which obviously I can hear that in your podcast. I can hear that you are connecting with people and that really resonates. And I think it's very important.
Yeah, I think you have to kind of find those moments. Everybody has them, whether you're a doctor or not, but especially if you have the privilege of being in medicine, working as a doctor, you have to find those moments that sort of encapsulate, like, why do I do this? I saved that person's life or that child or that parent, thanked you for helping them to get through something that was kind of a challenging thing. And somebody told me once that if you do a really good job, people will give you lots of pictures of George Washington to say thank you. So from a business standpoint, the best way to be excellent at business is just to do a tremendously good job for the people who've entrusted you, and they'll refer their friends and their family. And whatever the business model is, that integrity and that ability to like really connect with people seems like that
Yeah.
is laced throughout whatever business you might choose. But medicine is particularly meaningful because you're affecting those things that matter the very most to people.
Yeah, I mean, it's people's lives. It is literally life and death. It really is. It's those little things that really make a big difference that you don't realize, that hand on the shoulder or the kind words or the extra effort, how much that means down the road to somebody else and how that changes somebody else's life. I mean, that's why I'm in medical school, why I went to medical school, and why I'm a doctor now as an ear, nose, and throat surgeon helping my grandmother when she had cancer on Thanksgiving Day. And that just kind of stuck with me. And I'd like to think that that one kind act, where his family was probably pretty mad at him for leaving on Thanksgiving Day to come and change my grandmother's dressings and just to be with her and to give my family comfort. But I'd like to think that that one act has led to me being able to help hundreds, if not thousands of people and have a true impact on their life. And that to me is inspiring, and that helps when I am overburdened with paperwork or the not as great patient moments or the phone
Yeah.
calls to try and get something pre-approved.
I was at work yesterday, a super hard day, lots of challenging patients and delivering a baby in the middle of the day. And everybody wants everything. And at the end of those days, you're like, oh, this is terrible. Why would anybody be a doctor? But then you have to get to those moments where you made a difference. And I found, just probably like you have to be able to slow down once in a while and enjoy that moment. And the medical, like modern medical practice, makes it hard for you to actually slow down and enjoy the moment because you always have somebody waiting on you. But I found it's pretty helpful if I can reflect on the day and say, okay, while there were a lot of hard moments, there were a few moments each day where I can say, okay, that I helped somebody, I made a difference. And then I can probably work so that next time I don't design such a chaotic day. But sometimes it's out of your hands.
Yeah. Sometimes babies don't wait, right?
Right. They never do.
That's so great. So how do you find ways, like you were talking about yesterday, in the middle of a busy day, how do you find a way to be in the moment? How do you find a way to appreciate that opportunity that you have in that patient encounter or that moment? How do you find that?
I think most doctors will probably relate to this. It's hard because in the middle of the chaos, when you're delivering the baby and you're managing the emergency patient and you have a chaotic patient in clinic and everybody's mad because you're late, et cetera, et cetera. Those moments are hard because sometimes I feel like I just have to put on my happy face and just keep going, even though things are chaotic and I know I'm going to have a bunch of work afterwards. But what I've found helpful is on the drive home or at some point each day, I try to think, well, let me actually think through the patients I saw today. And usually there will be 3 or 4 that will highlight and say, okay, that person was really appreciative of what happened today. Or I discovered something that was going on with them that they didn't really know. Or we celebrated that moment when that person had their diabetes finally well controlled and they finally were able to manage something they haven't done for years. And so I try to reflect on those moments. In the actual moment of the chaos, there's a part of medical training that's maybe a little bit more like a military training. It's just mission purpose. You just dive in and hold your head down and get it done and try to be polite along the way. But realistically speaking, sometimes it's so chaotic and so busy, you just have to push through and get through. But to find the inspirational moments, I think it's important to have time to reflect. I'm not as good at like journaling as I should, but when I do actually write down things that matter to me, I find that I don't focus on the negative and the chaos. I usually focus on the inspirational or the stuff that helped. And then, then the other part, like, why do we go to work? Well, it's because of our families. It's because of the things that are outside of medicine. And so I try to find purpose in that, even through the chaotic, challenging moments that we all get.
I think that's really amazing because I will always, when I go over the end of the day, sometimes I walk home and when I'm working at the hospital close by, that I walk home and I really only remember the stressful things, the bad interactions, the tests that aren't back yet or whatever else. But I hardly ever sit back and think about the numerous good interactions that actually make me feel good and make me happy about the day. And thank you. I'm going to definitely change
Well,
that.
I have found the natural inclination for myself and for everybody, most people I've talked to, is to just focus on the unresolved or the chaotic. And so I think it's a purposeful activity. An example is I live at 6,000 feet. We live up in the mountains. It's cold. My wonderful, brave wife is from Arizona, and I talked her into moving to Idaho. And so I kind of learned this from her when we first moved back to this area, which is where I grew up, and it's this opportunity presented to come back and actually take the place of the doctor that delivered me. I mean, it's kind of this full circle craziness. But we came back to this area, and my wife from Southern Arizona suddenly had to grapple with a big, long winter and cold weather. And the natural inclination was to say, well, it's cold and miserable. And how come we can't ever have a warm day, yada, yada. And what she found is that she said, I made a goal to not say anything negative to myself or to anybody else for like months. She's, I'm going to do it for like 3 months. I'm not going to say a single negative thing about winter. Doesn't mean she had to be like positive. She just decided to say, was only going to kind of focus on those things that were non-negatives. And so as time went on, she learned how to snowmobile. She learned how to ski. She learned how to snowshoes. She found the enjoyment with in the long evenings at home, and so after a while, she no longer like it went from like what she talked about to what she actually thought about, and she found that I don't mind winter that much because now I don't. I kind of look forward to having a little bit quieter evenings. I look forward to going outside and playing in the snow, and so I've tried to do the same thing. Like, okay, it's all negative. I can focus on it, but if I make myself review those multiple interactions that were positive, then I can say, okay, even though this was chaotic, I can still do this. I can go back tomorrow and it's going to be all right.
I love it. I live at sea level here. So I do not live, there's lots of huge mountains around here, but I can see the mountains from here. But we don't get a lot of snow here, but we do get a lot of rain. So maybe I'll have to start thinking about that as well when I get a lot of the cold rain for like December to March, where it's like, I don't see the sun for very long.
Oh, that's true. Yeah,
Yeah.
if you're on the West Coast, there's not a lot of sunlight there in the winter.
No. All right. So I know that you and I were talking over the last month or so, and that you just got back from Uganda, however people out there will say it. I'll get comments about it. What are you doing there? How long have you been going there? And kind of what are some of your experience from there? Because this is kind of like a totally different set from working in rural.
I'm probably just crazy for taking it on. But when I was in medical school, I had the opportunity to do a medical service trip in Ecuador. And then when I was in residency, we had some of the directors there that were really focused on international medicine. And I got to go to Africa and to Mexico and a few places with that. And so I just kind of fell in love with the idea that you go help people in these remarkably challenging circumstances. And you can't fix it all, but you can make a little bit of a difference. And in general, you must work with a foundation or somebody that has boots on the ground continuously. And so the opportunity came up, like say about 10 years ago. A friend of a friend had found this wonderful foundation in Uganda, where there were these people from Uganda who were trying to install clean water and help find sponsorship for the kids to go to school and create sustainability projects and take care of people that have HIV and so many different things. And so I just went because this friend invited me to go, and I saw so much need and I saw the huge potential for these people to grow and change. And so we went back multiple times with them, and I actually made it so that one of their directors was able to go with us to Ecuador on one of the trips so that he could see how this other foundation worked. And it's just kind of been this building process over time. That foundation, it's called Child to Youth Foundation in Uganda. They have just done remarkable things with many hundreds of children. And then the water projects and sustainability projects have affected thousands of people. And now, the 10 years I've been working with them, they've just developed so much and helped all these students. And my friend that had worked with them for about 20 years has had sponsored students for 20 years. And now, instead of being stuck in this really deep poverty cycle, most of the students that were involved in that process now have professional training in something. They finished school, they know how to read and write, they have a skill set, or they've gone to college, or there's one that's going to be starting medical school there. There's a lot of things that are happening. And every one of those kids was in a situation where they would not have been able to go to school because there's not really a good public school system. So if the parents are not able to send their children to school, they just don't get an education. They're kind of stuck back in that real deep poverty cycle. You can't really spend your way out of poverty, but you can educate your way out of it. And so I find it inspiring when I get to go. And one thing I'll just say for folks who, if you've never been on like a medical service trip, you want to go with a foundation, so that you're not just trying to bring in a duffel bag full of medicines and leave. You go and contribute to what they're doing. But there's nothing like being in somebody's home or taking care of their child or helping them in that moment. And you could go to any country in the world and take pictures of all the beautiful things and see the animals and enjoy it. But it's just such a deep, fulfilling, connecting sort of experience to go and be part of those service trips. And then I've found it kind of recharges my battery when I come home and have to deal with prior authorizations and insurance and all the stuff that makes my life hard. I think, well,
Right.
but all those people that we got to help in Uganda, that was a really positive experience. And so I encourage, if you've never done that, contact me. I'll tell you how to get involved, because these organizations are really awesome, and they make a tremendous difference for the people they serve.
Yeah, we had a doctor. I had one of my mentors and friends from residency come on and talk about. She does a lot of stuff. She used to do stuff with MSF and or Doctors Without Borders.
Yeah.
And she has set up some palliative care residencies in East Africa, and that is really a phenomenal thing. I did years or a summer's worth of kind of going into medical clinics in rural Ghana 25 years ago, more than that, 27, 28 years ago. And that was really something that was, I thought, I was 19, 20 years old. I thought that I was going to be horribly, thought that I was going over there to kind of save them from themselves. And that's not at all what I ended up doing. That was such an eye-opening experience about my place in the world, and just the way that other people are living. And so they welcomed me in, they integrated me into a lot of what they did. And yeah, there were some things that I did that were helpful, but it was really life altering and life changing for me. And I agree that if anybody can get out there and do something like that, find a way.
Yeah,
but do it in a nice, respectful way as well.
Yeah, but realize that the people there, they live in these chaotic government situations that really make it so it's hard for them to get ahead, so to speak. It's hard for them to be successful. But the people are very similar they have the same goals and aspirations we do here. They're hardworking, they're intelligent, they've got all these goals. And so we've found when we work with them and do it their way and try to help them, it's not us imposing our culture or imposing some sort of superiority or anything like that. It's simply just saying, let's lend a hand and maybe help you
Absolutely.
in a way that you can't help yourself. They make a small amount of money or a small amount of time amplify or magnify to an amazing degree. And I'm always impressed when I go there, the scarcity that they deal with and the number of people they're able to serve and really, make a tremendous difference for those folks that they serve.
Absolutely. That was one of the things that you realize anywhere that you go in the world, that people still love their children. They love their husbands. They love their wives. They love their parents. All they want is to get them through that day and to have a better life. And I'm really thankful that you're doing that and helping them to achieve those goals and to set up something sustainable.
Yeah, it's cool. I'm so privileged to be a part of it.
That's great. So you have talked a lot about what you're doing. I was reading on your website. You've got, is it 3 kids, 4 kids?
I've got 4 kids. Yep.
4 kids. All right. So you are a rural doctor. You have 4 kids. You're married. You have a small farm. Is that right? Are you actually farming now, or do you just have?
I do. I was baling hay this morning. It was my day off.
Oh man.
So most of that is just me being insane. But how I told you back before, when I was a kid, my dad had this idea like, hey, you can farm, because I do like farming. I think it's fun. And that's a fun way to raise kids. They can hop on the 4-wheeler and go move the sprinkler pipes. And there's just a lot of freedom for them to kind of take care of stuff. We're just kind of way off the beaten path. And I really enjoy it. Like, they can go up in the mountains. And if we go on a hike or a bike ride, usually you never see a soul. I mean, you just have the 100,000 acres worth of mountain land to yourself. You never find another person. And so that, I guess, just being alone and having that freedom is a cool thing. So I enjoy the farming and the ranching and all that type of stuff. I couldn't do it alone. My brother and his family and some of my other family members that live in the area, definitely contribute and help. I couldn't do it on my own, but I still think that's kind of a full circle moment for me to be able to come back and do that. And so something I enjoy, and nobody ever calls or complains when I'm doing farm work. I find it just kind of something I can do with my hands, and it kind of just restores and rebuilds. And so I do find it enjoyable for sure.
So are your kids old enough to help out?
Yes, finally.
Yeah. Exactly.
Once they get, my dad always says, once you get to be old enough to be useful, then then it's time to move away. So my oldest daughter is 20, and she's gone. She's off to college and doing different things. My teenage kids are pretty helpful now. They're finally in that stage. We've been farming for a little over 10 years. And at first, my brother and I had to do it pretty much everything. And now we can turn it over to them. We're really not, a lot of times farming at this elevation, you don't really make a lot of money, but we are definitely in it to try to raise good kids and give them that experience. I hope it'll resonate with them and they can learn a lot of hands-on skills and stuff that will benefit them throughout their lives, no matter what they decide to do.
Yeah, just an amazing work ethic and an appreciation for the land. Yeah. I think that's great. So now the more that they start working, they get useful, and then they're like, I'm going away to college.
Yeah, that's right. Which is good. And that's what I want them to do. I want them to go get all the education they could possibly want and decide what they want to do with it and find how they're going to make their own impact in the world.
That's fantastic. Yeah, my two oldest are also gone, just graduated from high school, and out of here they moved 3,000 miles away, something like that. So,
well, it is kind of alarming, and sometimes when you think about how relatively little time you get with your kids, especially when they're kind of in their sentient years, if you want to think about it that way, you get a lot of time when they're little, and there is quite an impact. But when you kind of hit that middle school, junior high school, the number of years where you're able to influence and impact is small, and they're also a little bit more interested in what their friends and peers say than what they say their parents. And so I just think I'm thankful for the years that we've had with the kids, and I hope that they'll remember it. But it is kind of remarkable when you think about how you spend your time and how much you spend time at home. You can't squander those years because they go by quickly, and then suddenly your children are kind of formed, and you certainly hope that they can remember some of the good things that they were taught, but it's kind of out of your hands at that point.
Yeah. I've been really fortunate that Andrea and I have amazing kids. I think through absolutely no fault of our own. I think that despite us, that they're quite amazing, and that they are going to go on and live really fantastic lives. But, I think that more often than not, I've been an example of at least what not to do in that situation. They're amazing kids, and they know that I love them. But I do get that. And I do think that it's so important. COVID was one of the really wonderful things for us, because that was a time where we spent a lot of time with them because there was very little else that we could do. And so shortened clinic hours, not as much hospital business during that time. And then we ended up moving. And when we moved here, there was, all the masking and social distancing, and, a lot of things were shut down, and, a lot of activities. So we just took that time to go and do trips. And I would never regret that we would go skiing all the time. So we all learned how to ski. My wife knows how to ski very well. The four of us, myself and our three kids, had to learn. And that was some of the greatest time. And I would never regret that. I worked so hard when we moved here, and I was traveling a lot just on a daily basis. But I would never, ever take back that time and wish that I worked more. And I absolutely love those times. And I think that for me, it's been really important to think about. Again, I'm bringing this back to the podcast, your podcast, of finding what really inspires you and what you're doing it for, which is your family, your friends. And that was such an opportunity for us to be able to sit back and spend time with the kids, because most of that time, 98, 99% of the time that I will ever spend with my two boys is in the rearview mirror. And I am so thankful that I took that time to spend with my kids and go on ski trips for the weekend, or even take them on some longer ski trips, or go out to the lake and things like that as they were growing up. And for anybody who's listening, the hustle and bustle now, I'm in my late 40s and I'm feeling good about medicine, that a lot of that is kind of, been there, done that quite a bit. It's not that I'm perfect and not that everything is easy, but now, like you were saying earlier, I'm kind of getting close to my prime. I'm still not there yet, but I've still got still got some learning to do. But now's the time where I can start working hard and really be the most productive that I can be, because, two of my kids are gone. My daughter is still with us and I'm still making the efforts to spend time with her, but I can really ramp up the productivity and the saving and the working and all of that now. I mean, I would never trade any of the things that I did with my kids, and I feel like I haven't lost anything. And that was kind of dumb luck, but I think that that's one of the more important things that I've learned, at
Oh
least
yeah.
about family.
Oh yeah. Well,
So,
it's all about the kids. I mean, when you think about why you go to work, et cetera, I'm so privileged to have a job that is inspirational and helps so many people. But that pales in comparison to how important it is for me to spend time with the people that I love. I mean, that has to be the motivation for why you do what you do, no matter what your situation, whether you're married and have children of your own, or of spending time with friends. I mean, you got to fill up your bucket somewhere, and
yeah,
those experiences matter more than anything else. But I think as doctors, you have this really cool thing where you can both have a job that makes a tremendous difference and helps people, and you can have a pretty good family life. But I've found, just like you have probably, Rob, nobody will protect your personal time. You have to do it on your own, and you have to be the one that advocates and says, nope, here's the boundaries, and you don't get to go into that boundary unless I say you do. And it's really hard to
yeah.
protect that time, but we have to design systems and design our own lives to protect that space and that time with those things that matter most.
I think that that's probably, if I were to ask you what advice you would give to somebody, set some boundaries, find that inspiration, and focus on what really matters. There's always going to be more medicine, right? You can
Oh
always do
yeah.
more with medicine, but there's never going to be more time with your family. There's never going to be
No.
more time with your friends and, whatever is important to you, whatever hobby it is or whatever else. So,
Yeah. Well,
uh,
medicine will eat you alive. If you let it, it'll just take all your time. And you could give your cell phone out to every person and they would all call. I mean, every moment of your day could be occupied by it. But Rob, just to reflect back on my experience as a patient, I mean, you just kind of have to think about what that felt like. And I still try to think about it and try to learn from my own lessons. At 43, in the middle of, my youngest was still in elementary school. Suddenly the brakes are just totally pushed, stop. And I've done everything healthy and tried to be healthy and take good care of my body, et cetera. And then suddenly you get this huge, horrible diagnosis for no fault of your own. And it could happen to anybody. And so
yeah,
when in those moments, I didn't think about, oh, when do I get to go to work next? I didn't think about that at all. I was thinking about my kids. How's this going to work out for my wife and my family? And then the very, kind of down two or three thoughts later was, are we financially prepared for something like this? Do we have
yeah,
disability insurance? Have we prepared ourselves so that if I couldn't work again, would we be able to sustain our livelihood? Because we, didn't really earn any income for the first 10 years of marriage because I was always in school. And so
yeah,
all that stuff is really important to kind of think about.
yeah,
You got to protect the home and the family first, but medicine can be a wonderful job, but you have to have some of those protections in place, more so maybe even than others in other career fields, just because you've spent so many of those early productive years just in school without being able to really set aside any capital that would grow and develop so that you have financial resources when you're later on in life.
yeah. Well, thank you very much. So, how can people find you? Because they really do. Now, everybody's going to be inspired to listen to the Doctors Making a Difference podcast. So, how can they find you?
So any place you can find podcasts, Apple Podcasts or Spotify or any of them, you can type in Doctors Making a Difference. You can email me directly at, it's just editor at doctorsmakingadifference.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. Be happy to connect with anybody. That's one of my favorite things that I've found in podcasting is meeting really interesting, cool people. And so if somebody has questions or thoughts or inspiration or you want to be a guest on the podcast, or you have a good advice for me, let me know.
Peter, thank you so much for coming on. I really cannot thank you enough. And thanks for the good advice for me. Now I'm going to focus on the better things now instead of the doom and gloom. So thank you very much. And I really do hope to keep in touch with you. And I'm definitely going to continue listening to your podcast as well.
Likewise, Rob. Thank you very much.
Best of luck with everything.
Thank you.
Good luck with the harvest.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the InterestingMD podcast. Please check out my content on YouTube at InterestingMD and follow me on TikTok, Blue Sky, Instagram, Threads, and Facebook at The InterestingMD and on X at InterestingMD. If you have comments or questions and want to get in touch with me or any of my guests, please DM me on socials or email me at rob@interestingmd.com. If you have any ideas for a show and you want to share your hobbies with me or don't know where to get started on your own project, you can email ideas@interestingmd.com. Please like and subscribe to the podcast and YouTube channel to get the latest content. Much appreciation to Falter Media for editing, producing, and posting all InterestingMD content. Check them out, because if they can do this for me, imagine what they can do for you. See you next week.